Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back once again to another Fallout 4 settlement build. Today we're going to be checking out this Fallout bunker, and if you guys enjoyed the last Fallout shelter that we did, hopefully this one should be even more exciting considering it's so much bigger. And just to give you guys a quick estimate of really how big this place is compared to what we've done in the past, let's just say that this build alone has pretty much taken up the whole settlement build limit. But like always guys, any mods I use are going to be listed down in the description. By the way, I should probably mention that this build was heavily inspired by the movie 10 Cloverfield Lane, so you might see a lot of similarities, but that being said, hopefully you all enjoy the build, and without further ado, let's go ahead and take a closer look. So first things first guys, we'll go ahead and start here in the kitchen, and I'll try not to cover every single small detail considering there are so many of them in this build, and I think we've got about 5 rooms to check out altogether. And that's if you count the kitchen and then the living room as being separate. But I think the first thing you'll notice is how much more run down this side of the build is compared to, I guess, everything else. And I went about doing it this way because I figured this area is right next to the main door that would lead outside to the surface. So I figured the blast would kind of do the most damage over here. Although that being said, not everything else in the build is completely pristine. You'll notice a few items here and there are starting to wear down, and the outside world and all the elements are really starting to take a toll on this place, even though it is a pretty secure area. Also, another thing I should mention is that this isn't supposed to be a normal Fallout vault, but rather just a regular pre-war Fallout bunker. But anyways guys, you'll see over to the right hand side, this is where we store all of our kitchenware like plates, cups, and just really any sort of tools you'd need for serving a proper meal or even making one for that matter. And then to kind of go along with that, we have most of our food supplies over here on this shelf, although by no means is this their only source of food. They also have quite a bit over in the storage area, but this is just some they've pulled out to make it a bit easier to access. And we've also got the main kitchen area, and you can see this part of the build is really starting to look worn out. There's dirty dishes in the sink still, a broken mirror, and everything is just all scratched up, and I think that really helped give it a very worn down look. And then last but not least, for the kitchen area, you'll see we've got some cleaning supplies along with a nice little trash can there in the corner. And other than that, there's just a few more decorations, and I've also tried to make the bar here look as if this is where they would normally eat breakfast, and that's kind of why it's got the newspaper with the coffee, along with some nice sugar bombs. But other than that, I'd say that's pretty much everything for the kitchen. Now moving on, you'll see this is where they would most likely be eating their more formal style meals, like a nice family dinner or something of the sort, whereas the bar is more for breakfast, just because I figured they would be, you know, getting up at different times, and it's just a little less organized. But over in this area, we have a nice little table right there, just for other decorations. And there's also the big shelf set in the back, which also gave us a lot more room for just little tiny details. But I gotta say, as much as I enjoy how this build turned out, one thing I really am not a fan of is the atmosphere. And I'm not sure if that's because of how the light sort of reflects off all these vault pieces, but to me it just looks really washed out and very white, whereas some of our other builds have quite a bit of color and they look a lot more moody and atmospheric. Now, I guess if you wanted to, you could try some sort of a bunker that didn't have power, and that way you could use all the lanterns and candles, and maybe that might have a better look to it. But like I said, for some reason I'm just not a huge fan of the lighting in this build. But other than that, I think the vault pieces worked out quite well in terms of portraying a certain theme, because you can see how old-timey and retro the wallpaper looks, so I think that really helped out. But yeah, for the main living room area, I tried to make it so that everything was sort of centered around that TV there, and although obviously it wouldn't get reception anymore and they wouldn't be able to watch your normal channels, I'm sure they most likely had some DVDs or some VHS tapes that they could always just pop in and watch. And if that wasn't enough for entertainment, they've also got some comic books and magazines lying around. There's even this big giant radio and various sports equipment as well. Even though they don't have too much room, I figured maybe they'd eventually come up with some sort of crazy sports game to play around in here. And there's also various board games like checkers, chess, and even Blast Radius. And other than that, for the living room area, there's just a whole lot more storage, old-timey looking decorations, and even some plants, just to give the build a bit more color. So next up, I think we'll go ahead and move on into the kids' bedroom. And depending on your preference, you could either imagine that there were two kids, or maybe there was a kid in the making, and they were just kind of preparing for the future, and that's why there's the bunk bed there. And inside the kids' room, you'll see there's just loads and loads of kids' toys and just different sorts of memorabilia, like the sports card there. There's some more comic books, like the Astoundingly Awesome Tales, a bobblehead, just more toys on the shelves, Jangles the Moon Monkey, lying against the radiator, and even a crap load of stuff over here. So even though the world was sort of ending in a way, life really wasn't all that bad for the kids living here. But anyways, next up we'll go ahead and move into what I would consider the most boring room in the whole build. And this is just their main place of storage. And you'll see they have a lot of it. So there's just materials and supplies pretty much everywhere you look, and even various means to transport those around the shelter. And they've also got a little ironing board back here, and some more storage way over there in the back. And then I think the last little neat detail we have lying around is the sleeping bag. And this is just here to make it look as though someone snuck into the vault or was allowed inside, yet the family didn't really trust them too much, or maybe it's just because all the other beds were occupied. But now they're obviously being forced to sleep in here. So it is a very small detail, but as you can tell, it does still have a decent amount of story behind it. And lastly, we'll go ahead and move on in to check out the parents' bedroom, which I think is about the same size as the storage area, but I'm pretty sure we can all admit that it definitely looks a whole lot better and at least a whole lot more interesting. So over here in the corner, maybe the dad or mom just writes stories here. That doesn't have to be the case, but I like to pretend that maybe one of them was a author back in the day. And then to the left of that is the bathroom area, which is very similar to the one in the movie. And it's just really not a pleasant place to do your business. I mean, really the only sense of security here is that damn curtain. And even then, people are still gonna hear you and probably catch a glimpse of you from time to time. I mean, the curtain's not that big. But that being said, our last Fallout shelter didn't have a bathroom, so I'd say this is a pretty nice step up from that. Aside from the creepy bathroom, though, we also have the main living space for the parents, and there's also a lot of little details over here. And hopefully, I've made it look like each of the small details really has a purpose and makes sense where it is, instead of just throwing a lot of random crap around just to fill up empty space. So for instance, the hairbrush and soap are out maybe after a shower, and there's also the toothbrush and toothpaste sitting there, just so they're ready to go in case someone needs to clean up. And there's also a towel sitting around here and there, a dirty magazine next to the bed. I like to think the alarm clock's in a fitting place, and lastly, you got the baby bottle and rocker over next to the crib, along with the special book over there. So hopefully stuff like this just goes to show that it's better to place less details that actually belong than just a bunch of clutter that really shouldn't be there in the first place. Because I know a lot of people have a tough time reaching that good in between, so hopefully seeing all this stuff throughout the build has at least helped you out a little bit. But anyways guys, that should do it for today, so hopefully you enjoyed the build. I'd have to say this is probably my favorite one we've done so far, and I guess a close second might have to be our Bounty Hunter bar. That being said, I am quite curious to know what your guys' favorite builds are. Is it this one now, or maybe one of our very old ones? So feel free to let me know that down in the comments, along with any ideas for future builds you might have. But as always guys, I will see you in the next one.